From now on, he will no longer be able to control his battle will. When Mu Chen uttered these words, not only did Hong Yu's delicate face change drastically across from him, but even the figures of Nine Nether and the others beside him trembled slightly, their expressions showing flickers of shock. How is that possible? Hong Yu's face lost all color as she exclaimed in disbelief. Their battle will genius had merely suffered a single defeat. His spiritual energy within remained stable. How could he suddenly lose the ability to control his battle will? However, Mu Chen paid no attention to the ashen-faced Hong Yu. His gaze remained firmly fixed on the pale-faced demon gate battle will genius, whose eyes were tightly shut. He continued, "Not only will your battle will genius never regain control of his battle will, but he will also never awaken again. Now, he's nothing more than a living corpse. Once the spiritual energy in his body naturally depletes, even his physical form will deteriorate and shatter." These words struck Hong Yu and her group like a bolt of lightning. They were left momentarily speechless. It took a long while before they gradually recovered from their shock. Hong Yu's once charming face, as lovely as peach blossoms, now turned a shade of dark green. She had discerned that Mu Chen wasn't lying. It seemed that their Demon Gate's soul battle will genius had indeed been utterly ruined by Lin Ming of the Netherworld Palace. Lin Ming's methods are truly bizarre and vicious. To destroy someone's thought seed like this, I have never even heard of such a thing before. Mu Chen frowned. In his perception, the mental will of this Demon Gate battle will genius seemed to have been forcibly extracted and consumed by something. Such unusual techniques caused even Mu Chen's heart to grow slightly heavier with caution. It seemed the Grand Hunting War was truly a magnet for all kinds of monsters and demons to crawl out of the woodwork. Caution was now more necessary than ever. This enmity will not be forgotten by our Demon Gate. Sooner or later, we'll settle the score with the Netherworld Palace. Hong Yu gritted her silver teeth, her beautiful eyes aflame with fury. Clearly, she was enraged by the insidious and ruthless tactics of the Netherworld Palace. After all, the Demon Gate had poured immense resources into training this battle will genius, only for Lin Ming to destroy him completely. The loss was nothing short of tragic. Lady Hong Yu, do you have any intelligence about the recent movements of the Netherworld Palace? Mu Chen asked. Though he had yet to encounter Lin Ming personally, he inexplicably sensed that Lin Ming would inevitably confront him in time. At these words, Hong Yu fell into a brief contemplation before responding. The group from the Netherworld Palace led by Lin Ming only became active in the past half-month. Before that, they were relatively low profile. In these past 2 weeks, Lin Ming led the forces of the Netherworld Palace in strikes against 8 factions. Each faction had a common trait. They were all led by commanders skilled in battle will. The results, naturally, were as one would expect. Lin Ming crushed all opposition with overwhelming force, his victories resounding far and wide. His ferocity has made him a name feared throughout the region, causing other factions to tread cautiously when dealing with him. Mu Chen's eyes narrowed slightly. What about the defeated commanders? What became of them? Hong Yu pondered for a moment, her delicate brows furrowing. It seems no news of them has surfaced since. Are you saying? Mu Chen gave a small nod, his heart slightly shaken. If the defeated commanders had faced the same fate as the Demon Gate's battle will genius, then Lin Ming undoubtedly possessed a terrifying ability to forcibly seize control of someone's thought seed. Such ruthlessness made Lin Ming a particularly troublesome opponent. Lin Ming's unstoppable advance was finally halted recently when he encountered Zhan Tai Lu Li. Their clash ended in a stalemate, with neither side able to gain the upper hand. Hong Yu continued. It seems that Lin Ming has already become a battle formation master, Mu Chen said with an acknowledging nod. To be capable of holding his ground against Zhan Tai Lu Li, who had inherited the legacy of the Array Emperor, Lin Ming must have succeeded in attaining the qualifications of a battle formation master as well. At this, Hong Yu's expression darkened further. It was clear that this was hardly good news for them. Lady Hong Yu, what are your plans next? Mu Chen asked with a slight smile. Right now, we are already within the inner region of the fallen battlefield. Our priority is to regroup with the rest of the Demon Gate forces as soon as possible. I imagine your great Luo domain holds the same intention, does it not? Hong Yu responded frankly, not bothering to conceal the truth. After all, the forces entering this inner region all seemed to share the same goal. Only by regrouping with their respective factions could they effectively avoid being wiped out by other powers. Once all the factions' forces converged, the true showdown of strength would undoubtedly follow. At that point, any move made would undoubtedly shake the entire battlefield. Chen nodded lightly before smiling again. The Demon Gate is one of the top forces in the northern domain, and naturally, we won't suffer such a huge loss for nothing. Once our Demon Gate's forces gather, we will certainly reclaim our footing, said Hongyu, her voice laced with a trace of coldness. It was evident that she was truly enraged by Lin Ming's actions. Chen chuckled and replied, "But by that time, the Netherworld Palace will likely have gathered their own forces as well. Their strength is no less than that of the Demon Gate." Adding Lin Ming's power into the equation, even if the Demon Gate deploys all its forces, I fear it would still be hard to gain the upper hand. Hongyu was momentarily stunned before her beautiful, water-like eyes gazed at Chen. Her crimson lips curved into a charming smile as she said sweetly, "Brother Mu, if you have something to say, just say it outright. Join forces and take down Lin Ming. That way, we can severely damage the Netherworld Palace." Chen stated decisively and straightforwardly. "We've heard some rumors recently. It seems Lin Ming is quite interested in Brother Mu. Based on my guess, it won't be long before he comes looking for you. Is this proposal your way of asking my Demon Gate to join forces against him?" Hongyu's eyes glimmered as she smiled. "While Lin Ming is powerful, he's not enough to make me afraid." Chen smiled faintly. Although his voice was calm, it carried a confidence that even Hongyu couldn't argue against. After all, she had witnessed this young man achieve miracles on multiple occasions. The Netherworld Palace is indeed strong. Relying solely on the Daluo domain might not be enough to take them down. However, if the Demon Gate assists us, we should be able to deliver a significant blow. I believe such cooperation would benefit both of us, Chen said. Hongyu pondered for a moment, clearly tempted by the idea. However, she responded cautiously, "I will relay this to my superiors. Ultimately, I don't have the authority to decide whether or not we cooperate. Additionally, even if we work together, our goal will solely be to deal with the Netherworld Palace. If you plan to target other top forces, the Demon Gate won't get involved." Hongyu was exceedingly clever and clearly understood the conflicts between the Daluo domain, the Divine Hall, and the Mystic Hall. Naturally, she wasn't willing to provoke other top forces just because of an alliance against the Netherworld Palace. Hearing her response, Chen casually nodded. He obviously hadn't expected the Demon Gate to align with them against the Divine Hall and Mystic Hall as well. In this grand hunting war, collaborations were purely based on mutual interests. Then, we shall take our leave for now. Once the Demon Gate has regrouped, and if we take action, I will send word to you. By then, Brother Mu, we'll be counting on your prowess." Having reached a verbal agreement, Hongyu didn't linger much longer. She smiled charmingly at Chen, her alluring demeanor captivating. With a wave of her jade-like hand, she gracefully turned and flew back toward the Demon Gate's forces. The sprawling figure of the army surged like a tidal wave, transforming into streaks of light that swiftly disappeared over the horizon. "You're planning to work with the Demon Gate?" After the Demon Gate's departure, 9 Nether and Mountain Splitting King looked toward Chen. Although Chen's strength had just recently broken through to the 5th grade supreme, their time cooperating with him had convinced even an expert like Mountain Splitting King to take his words seriously. No one viewed his decisions as reckless anymore. Though I don't expect this collaboration to last long, at the very least, it could ease some of the pressure on us. After all, we can't afford to provoke every top force, Chen replied. Naturally, he wasn't counting on a deeply solid alliance. However, the Demon Gate and Netherworld Palace had long-standing grievances. If the Netherworld Palace dared to target them, Chen wouldn't hesitate to join hands with the Demon Gate to make them pay the price. "Let's move. We should regroup with the other kings as soon as possible. The situation is becoming increasingly chaotic, and only by uniting with them can we ensure our safety," Chen said. The group nodded in agreement. Even the Demon Gate, a top force, had suffered severe losses. It was evident they needed to act cautiously. Whoosh, whoosh. Seeing no objections, Chen took the lead, speeding ahead, with the mighty army following closely behind. Over the next 2 days, Mu Chen's group did not pause once, heading directly to their rendezvous point. Along the way, they encountered a number of other groups, but ultimately faced no substantial resistance. Their rapid pace led them to slow down on the 3rd day. Ahead of them was a massive valley, guarded by an imposing army. The atmosphere was stern and oppressive, with waves of spiritual energy sweeping over the land. However, upon seeing the grand force before them, Mu Chen and his group discreetly breathed a sigh of relief. They recognized these troops. They belonged to the rest of the Daluo domain forces. This was the rendezvous point where the kings of the Daluo domain would gather. After 3 months, the kings of the Great Luo domain once again gathered. Yet, 3 months ago, Mu Chen's strength among these kings had merely placed him at the very bottom. Now, however, if one were to assess his overall power, he'd undoubtedly rank among the top 3. Over these 3 months, Mu Chen's growth was nothing short of monumental. Just as Mu Chen and the rest were preparing to lead their armies into the valley, a sharp, urgent wailing sound suddenly erupted from within the valley itself. The expressions of Mu Chen, Nine Nether, and the others changed drastically upon hearing the noise. That was the emergency signal of the Great Luo domain. The piercing and frantic wails echoed sharply from deep within the massive valley, their urgency reverberating across the air. As the sound spread, the vast army stationed outside the valley stirred, waves rippling visibly among their ranks. Moments later, figures shot out sharply from the army, swiftly darting into the valley, obeying a direct command. The recently arrived Mu Chen, Nine Nether, and their companions also felt their expressions tighten into frowns. What could have caused such an emergency signal? Mountain-splitting king, you all enter first. A deep, commanding voice resonated from within the valley. It was none other than the voice of the Xun'er king. Move! Mu Chen, Nine Nether, the mountain-splitting king, and the others wasted no time. After ensuring their armies were stationed outside the valley, they transformed into rays of light and shot straight towards its depths. The armies guarding the valley, upon recognizing their regiments, quickly made way for their passage. Whoosh! The group descended rapidly into the valley, speeding through its confines. In a matter of moments, they arrived at the heart of the valley, where a towering stone platform stood. Numerous figures had already gathered atop it, with the Xun'er king and the other kings at the center. However, the atmosphere in the valley was taut. Grim expressions etched onto the faces of the gathered kings. Mu Chen and Nine Nether exchanged wary glances before landing quickly and greeting the Xun'er king with a respectful clasp of their hands. "You're finally here," the Xun'er king said, his initially tense expression softening slightly as his gaze fell on their group. "Xun'er king, what's happened?" the mountain-splitting king asked, his gaze locked on the highly regarded Xun'er king with a frown drawn deep upon his face. The Xun'er king's expression remained dark as he waved his sleeve. A bronze mirror shot out, hovering midair as it released a beam of light that spread across the sky, forming a massive projection. Within the projected light, staggering spiritual energy roared violently upwards. Vast swarms of figures clashed, their sheer numbers blotting out the sky and the earth. One of the forces was clad entirely in armor that gleamed like forged ice, an intimidating chill emanating across the battlefield, causing the temperature to plummet. Amidst their ranks, snowflake-like banners fluttered in the air. "It's the Ice River King." The mountain-splitting king narrowed his eyes sharply as soon as he saw the snowflake insignia, his expression hardening. The banner was unmistakably that of the Glacier Hall, and by extension, the army belonged to the Ice River King, one of the kings of the Great Luo Heaven domain. And the ones intercepting the Ice River King are. Mu Chen's gaze zeroed in on the other force in the mirrored image. There, tumultuous black clouds churned, spreading an oppressive chill. Hovering amidst this scene was a banner depicting a menacing skull. "It's the Netherworld Palace," the Spirit Sword King exclaimed, his face twisting with concern. The Ice River King's army had been intercepted by the forces of the Netherworld Palace. Mu Chen continued his focused gaze on the Netherworld Palace contingent. Among the swirling black clouds, a lone figure emerged from the darkness. Draped in a black robe, His entire being radiated a bone-chilling cold. He lifted his head slightly, revealing a pair of narrow, sinister eyes. The man's gaze fell upon the Glacier Hall's army, his lips curling into what seemed like a mocking smirk. Then, with a single vertical motion of his arm, his hand slashing through the air. Boom. Behind him, the surging black clouds condensed suddenly. From within them emerged a terrifying force. A massive black skull, thousands of feet in size, materialized from the swirling fog of battle intent. The skull's surface was densely etched with countless intricate battle runes. Roar! The giant skull opened its mouth wide, unleashing a ghostly wail that shook the heavens. Black sound waves surged outward with devastating speed, obliterating everything in their path. The ground beneath cracked violently, and the surrounding mountain peaks were sheared off abruptly, as if sliced clean by an unseen sword. Within the ranks of the Glacier Hall's army, several commanders with innate battle-intent talents immediately sprang into action. They united their forces, commanding streams of battle will to form powerful beams that pierced outward in retaliation. Boom. However, the gap between the two forces was simply too vast. Wherever the black sound wave passed, the piercing cold battle will beams shattered instantly, scattering as icy mist filled the air. Splat! Several commanders from Glacier Hall spewed blood as though struck by a heavy blow. Even within the ranks of Glacier Hall's army, numerous warriors coughed up blood, evidently caught in the devastating aftershocks. Facing the battered Glacier Hall, the black-robed man showed no mercy. His ruthless offensive surged forward, forcing Glacier Hall into a steady retreat. Warriors fell one after another, their heart meridians shattered by the impact of battle will, plummeting from the sky. In mere moments, Glacier Hall suffered devastating losses, and its once proud army was left in complete disarray. What followed was overwhelmingly one-sided. When the Glacier army could no longer hold the front, a sudden burst of blinding light shot out from their ranks, charging directly toward the black-robed man. This full-fledged attack held such power that even the sky seemed to crack apart. Such an overwhelming attack, unsurprisingly, came from none other than the long-dormant Ice River King himself. Yet, contrary to expectations, his assault failed to produce the desired result. The moment he charged forward, four shadowy figures emerged from the massive ranks of Netherworld Palace. The four converged simultaneously, unleashing a torrent of spiritual energy that tore through the void, meeting the Ice River King head-on. Splat! The power of these four was on par with the Ice River King's own. And now, joining forces, they delivered a bone-crushing blow. The Ice River King spewed blood and was sent reeling backward, his body riddled with wounds that leaked fresh blood. The four shadows appeared behind the severely injured Ice River King, reaching out to grab him with effortless precision. In mere moments, the Ice River King, his fate undetermined, was subdued in their grasp. Seeing their leader captured, the Glacier army's morale completely crumbled. Their fighting spirit vanished, prompting a panicked retreat. The black-robed man noticed this and curled his lips into a sinister smile. With a cold wave of his hand, his voice rang out chillingly across the skies. Kill them all. Leave no survivors. Behind him, his army charged forth like a plague of locusts, and what unfolded next was a massacre. Glacier Hall's warriors, numbering in the thousands, were slaughtered nearly to the last man. Only a sparse few managed to flee by sheer luck. After the slaughter, the battlefield was drenched in blood, painting the earth crimson. The black-robed man hovered mid-air, his cold gaze condescending. Around him floated the unconscious commanders of Glacier Hall. Grinning viciously, he extended his hand, touching their foreheads in a flash of lightning-fast movements. Their bodies began to writhe unnaturally, faces growing increasingly pale, as if the very essence of life was being drained from them. In just a matter of breaths, their lifeless bodies stiffened. The black-robed man tossed them aside carelessly and then lifted his head. His gaze seemed to pierce space, focusing on the mirrored projection. In a voice dripping with malice, he announced, "In 3 days, Netherworld Palace will convene a heroes' assembly at the Skeleton Mountain Range. Daluo Heaven Domain must attend. Otherwise, before the gathered forces, I will execute the Ice River King on the spot." He paused slightly, a wicked grin spreading across his face. His tone grew darker. Also, that boy from Daluo Heaven Domain, the one called Mu Chun, must come as well. I imagine your mental will be delicious. SSSHHH. The eerie laughter of the black-robed man echoed through the valley. Yet, as the scene faded from view, the image disappeared. The Xun'er king's expression turned ice-cold. With a wave of his sleeve, the bronze mirror before him shattered into dust. In the valley, the expressions of the other kings were equally grim. Anger bubbled in their eyes. It was clear that Netherworld Palace had trampled on the dignity of the entire Daluo Heaven Domain. Mu Chun and Nine Nether shared the same grim expressions. Netherworld Palace's actions were appallingly tyrannical. Not only were their methods cruel, but sending such a message to openly humiliate Daluo Heaven Domain was a blatant challenge. The one we saw earlier, the Xun'er king spoke in a low tone, breaking the silence, is Lin Ming, the battle formation master from Netherworld Palace who has been making waves recently. This revelation drew serious looks from the gathered kings. Lin Ming's name had been on everyone's radar lately. While his individual spiritual energy might not have concerned the kings much, his status as a battle formation master demanded caution. After all, the swift defeat of Glacier Hall's forces was something they had all just witnessed. Utilizing the power of battle will, Lin Ming could very well dominate even a 6th grade supreme. Mu Chen's eyes narrowed slightly. From Lin Ming's earlier moves, he had already discerned the man's identity. The black skull that Lin Ming wielded bore over 10,000 battle runes, confirming that he had indeed reached the rank of 10,000 runes battle array master. What do you all make of this? The Xun'er king asked, his gaze sweeping over the others. His voice was heavy. Netherworld Palace has arranged this so-called heroes assembly. Rumor has it that many factions have received invitations. With the Ice River King in their hands, if they execute him in front of these factions, it will undoubtedly humiliate Daluo Heaven Domain. This could have a devastating impact on morale, especially with the impending war. Should we head to the Skeleton Mountain Range to rescue the Ice River King? The Spirit Sword King mused after a brief pause. Could it be that the Netherworld Palace intends to wipe out our entire Great Luo Heaven Domain? The Blood Eagle King frowned as he spoke. It's better to be safe than sorry. If the Ice River King is killed, the reputation of the Great Luo Heaven Domain will be tarnished. The Domain Lord might even be enraged. The Xun'er king watched the differing opinions of the gathered kings, his brow also furrowing. He then turned his gaze to the mountain-splitting king. Among the kings of the Great Luo Heaven Domain, aside from himself, the mountain-splitting king had the highest prestige. Without hesitation, he asked, "What does the mountain-splitting king think?" Hearing this, the mountain-splitting king pondered briefly before his gaze unexpectedly drifted toward Mu Chun. "What suggestions does King Mu have?" This response left the Xun'er king and the other high-ranking members of the Great Luo Heaven Domain slightly stunned. Prior to the start of the Grand Hunting War, while Mu Chun had leveraged the king-conferring ceremony to become the youngest king in the Great Luo Heaven Domain, his strength was only barely sufficient to reach the threshold of kingship. Thus, he had been consigned to the lowest rank among the kings. However, now the mountain-splitting king had taken the initiative to seek Mu Chen's opinion with genuine courtesy, even showing a hint of respect. This surprised the Xun'er king and the Great Luo Heaven Domain's higher-ups. Haha, don't underestimate King Mu. He is currently the only battle formation master we have in the Great Luo Heaven Domain. Even Zhan Tai Lu Li has suffered significant losses at his hands. The mountain-splitting king remarked with a chuckle as he noticed the expressions of the others. Oh, hearing this, even the Xun'er king's expression shifted as he turned to look at Mu Chun with a more solemn gaze. He was well aware of the formidable abilities a battle formation master could wield. What does King Mu think of this matter? The Xun'er king smiled at Mu Chun, his demeanor turning more respectful. Any initial doubts stemming from Mu Chen's age and inexperience had now vanished. Mu Chun politely nodded back at the Xun'er king. Under the collective gazes of those present, he briefly contemplated before calmly speaking. "I suggest we rescue the Ice River King." The Skeleton Mountain Range lay in the southwestern region of the inner area of the fallen battlefield. This expansive area was filled with jagged peaks, many of which revealed exposed, ancient bones. Over time, These remains had weathered and eroded until the entire mountain range took on an eerie, pale hue. From a distance, it appeared as though the region was shrouded in snow. However, upon closer inspection, one would detect a chilling, oppressive atmosphere. As the wind swept through, it stirred up clouds of bone dust, filling the air with a gloomy and otherworldly aura. In the past, the Skeleton Mountain Range rarely saw visitors. While many powerful figures had fallen in this region, few valuable relics were to be found. As such, the various factions had little reason to venture into this desolate area. But today, the once quiet and barren region had been completely transformed. Explosions of fiery energy erupted, erasing the pervasive chill as wave after wave of powerful figures descended upon the area. Whoosh! Whoosh! The sound of countless figures cutting through the air rang out as they poured in from every direction. This massive influx of people quickly organized themselves, landing in an orderly manner throughout the vast Skeleton Mountain Range. Deep within the mountain range lay a flat expanse spanning tens of thousands of feet. From a bird's-eye view, the area appeared as a massive imprint of a giant hand, its sheer scale a testament to a once mighty figure who had shattered the mountains with a single strike. Now, this area had become a gathering place for numerous factions, each taking a distinct position around the edges of the giant handprint. Their eyes darted in vigilant observation of one another. While many groups had arrived one after another, there was little in the way of interaction. By the time factions had reached this inner region of the battlefield, they were all established forces of considerable strength, and many bore bitter grudges with one another. Some harbored murderous intent so strong that their eyes burned with hatred upon meeting. Yet, for now, these animosities remained suppressed. All present understood that this grand assembly of heroes had a central focus: the few supreme forces of the Northern Domain. Though the smaller factions harbored their own desires, they knew their strength fell short. As various factions converged upon the Skeleton Mountain Range, a sudden, earth-shaking commotion arose from the depths of the range. All eyes turned toward the source, and what followed was a breathtaking scene. A torrent of vibrant radiance swept across the skies, its overwhelming force casting shadows over this vast expanse before finally halting high above the region. The gathered factions' gazes immediately locked onto the phenomenon, and the air was soon filled with startled exclamations. "It's the forces of the Netherworld Palace." From the horizon, it appeared as though black clouds were surging forward. However, closer inspection revealed that these were legions of warriors clad in black armor, their presence brimming with an icy, menacing battle will. Even without fully unleashing their power, the oppressive aura emanating from them was enough to send chills through the skin of even sixth-grade Supremes. At the forefront of the Netherworld Palace's mighty hosts hovered several figures. Leading the group was a middle-aged man draped in heavy black armor. His gaunt face exuded a sinister aura, with a pair of piercing eyes that seemed to reach straight into one's soul. Behind him stood the familiar figure of the Netherworld Prince. Flanking the prince was a slim man in a billowing black robe, his sharp, blade-like lips curling into a faint, razor-edged smile. This man was none other than Lin Ming, the battle formation master whose infamy had spread like wildfire throughout the fallen battlefield. It was by his hand that the Ice River King and his forces had suffered utter defeat. Beside the three, additional figures emanated waves of spiritual energy so strong they were unmistakably at the level of sixth-grade Supremes. It was clear that the Netherworld Palace had mobilized their full might this time. Such an intimidating lineup could effortlessly annihilate any top-tier faction within the Northern Domain. The black-armored middle-aged man took a calm, yet commanding glance at the various factions below. Then, his eyes narrowed as he gazed into the distance. After a brief pause, the corners of his lips curled upward in a faint smile. He spoke softly, yet his words carried a thunderous weight that filled the heavens and earth. "Well, it seems everyone has arrived. Since that's the case, why hide any further? Show yourselves." His voice reverberated like rolling thunder, shaking the terrain and cascading outward in waves so tangible they seemed to tear through the void. Within the Skeleton Mountain Range, the gathered factions tensed at his words. Only the leaders of the top-tier factions exchanged subtle glances, a flicker of understanding shining briefly in their eyes as they tilted their heads skyward. Moments after the middle-aged man's declaration, the heavens trembled. A suffocating spiritual energy pressure seemed to pierce through space itself, causing the very mountain range to quake. Boom, boom. The tremors intensified as roiling spiritual energy churned. Innumerable eyes lifted, only to see streams of multicolored lights streaking from the distant horizon with overwhelming momentum. These torrents of energy sliced through the void, covering the skies like waves of tempestuous clouds, arriving above the Skeleton Mountain range in mere moments. What emerged was a collection of forces that exuded a sky-swallowing presence. Their boundless spiritual energy twisted the surrounding space, while the sheer weight of their power pressed down on the onlookers, leaving even the top-tier factions pale-faced and heavy-hearted. They couldn't help but inwardly sigh at the unmistakable chasm between peak-level forces and their own. Divine Hall, Great Luo Heaven Domain, Xiantian Palace, 10,000 Saints Mountain, Demon Gate, Serpent God Temple. The great powers have truly gathered. Adding in the Netherworld Palace, nearly every top-tier faction in the Northern Domain is here. This assembly of heroes is the real deal. The Grand Hunting War hasn't even reached its final battle, yet it's already escalated to this extent. It seems today's gathering won't end easily. Hell, let them fight. If these top-tier forces exhaust one another, we smaller factions might just find an opportunity to rise. They've monopolized far too many resources in the Northern Domain as it is. As the titans of the northern skies loomed, whispers began to ripple through the gathered crowds in the valley below. The murmurs carried a mix of awe, expectation, and cold calculation. Nevertheless, it was evident that with the arrival of these monumental forces, the gathering of heroes had officially lived up to its name. Amidst the waves of hushed discussions, a figure stood silently toward the southwest of the sky, Chen. His eyes immediately turned toward the direction where the Netherworld Palace's forces awaited. As his gaze settled upon the black-armored middle-aged man at the helm of the army, Chen's body instinctively tensed. The middle-aged man clad in black armor was none other than the heavenly evil king of the Netherworld Palace, a figure of high status within their ranks. His current strength was likely at the level of a 7th grade supreme. Among the kings of the Great Luo Heaven Domain, only the Xun'er king could match him. Nine Nether followed Chen's gaze toward the heavenly evil king and softly said, her tone laced with caution. Hearing this, Chen nodded slightly, his expression tensing. Just as he was about to speak, his expression shifted subtly, and his gaze moved sideways. His eyes landed on Lin Ming, who stood behind the heavenly evil king. At this moment, Lin Ming's cold, eerie eyes were locked onto him with the gaze of a predator eyeing its prey. Seeing Chen's gaze meet his, Lin Ming's blade-sharp lips curled into a sinister smile. He extended his scarlet tongue, licking his lips with a look of hunger glimmering in his eyes. That's Lin Ming. He's the one who captured the Ice River King, Nine Nether said coldly, her voice filled with disdain. Chen nodded lightly, staring at Lin Ming's unsettling eyes. His black pupils narrowed slightly as a dangerous light flickered beneath his gaze. However, Chen chose not to be drawn into Lin Ming's provocation. Instead, his focus quickly shifted to another area in the sky. There, he saw another imposing group, members of the Divine Hall. At the forefront of the Divine Hall's forces stood an elderly man with white hair. His muscular frame exuded an overwhelming sense of oppression, and the faint trace of draconic majesty emanated from him as his piercing gaze swept across his surroundings. The pressure this man gave Chen wasn't a bit weaker than that emanating from the heavenly evil king of the Netherworld Palace. That's the Sky Dragon Lord of the Divine Hall, one of the most powerful mountain lords, Nine Nether explained. And besides him, leading Xiantian Palace this time, is the strongest of the divine generals, the Heavenly General. Nine Nether extended her delicate hand, pointing toward 10,000 Saints Mountain. There, Chen saw an elder dressed in white robes, standing tall while clutching a snake staff. That white-robed elder is the Saint Elder, the leader of the elders of 10,000 Saints Mountain. She then gestured toward another group. That red-robed woman from the Demon Gate is known as the Demon Fairy. Her reputation is vast, and in the Northern Domain, She's considered among the premier experts. And then there's the 10,000 Pythons elder from the Serpent God Temple. 9 Nether's beautiful eyes swept over each faction, introducing to Mu Chun the strongest figures who had gathered here. Hearing her detailed rundown, Mu Chen's heart grew a shade grimmer. It seemed like the so-called meeting of heroes this time had indeed drawn out the full forces of the top factions. If a clash broke out, it would be nothing short of apocalyptic. Mu Chun sighed inwardly, but at that moment, he suddenly sensed a gaze fall upon him. Lifting his eyes, he locked onto a pair of beautiful ones. The woman dressed in a snow-white gown was none other than Zhantai Lu Li of the Divine Hall. Their gazes met briefly before they both turned away almost simultaneously. Their actions underscored their shared understanding. Any familiarity or shared history could not be revealed here as their current allegiances stood at odds. To have all of you here as invited guests, we of the Netherworld Palace owe you our gratitude. The sudden voice of the heavenly evil king broke through the sky, his words accompanied by a faint smile as he cupped his hands in a gesture of politeness. However, the Xun'er king's response was anything but courteous. He lazily lifted his eyelids, his voice dripping with cold, killing intent that spread palpably throughout the air, sending waves of unease through the gathered factions. Hand over the captive, or prepare for war. The choice is yours, Netherworld Palace. When the Xun'er king's chilling and unrelenting words echoed across the sky, an undercurrent of tension gripped the entire gathering. None had expected the great Luo Heaven Domain to strike such a confrontational stance from the onset. The air thickened with volatility, as though the gathering of heroes might erupt into chaos at any moment. The heavenly evil king's eyes narrowed ever so slightly as icy brilliance flickered within them. Standing at the forefront of the Netherworld Palace army, he slowly lifted his gaze, meeting the piercing eyes of the Xun'er king head-on. The bone-chilling aura exchanged between them seemed potent enough to freeze the air. Xun'er king, do you truly view this as the proper way to ask for someone? The heavenly evil king replied slowly, his voice tinged with disdain. If the great Luo Heaven Domain were willing to adopt a more respectful tone, perhaps plead a little, I might have spared the Ice River King for the greater good. But as things stand, you hardly seem here for negotiations. The Xun'er king's lips curved into a sinister smile, his chilling gaze fixed firmly on the heavenly evil king. Heavenly evil king, tell me, what gave you the impression that we're here to negotiate? The Xun'er king's words were resolute, exuding an overwhelming killing intent. The capture of the Ice River King and the near annihilation of his forces left a deep enmity that could not simply be swallowed without retaliation. If such a grudge was ignored, the great Luo Heaven Domain's reputation would undoubtedly be ruined entirely after today. The mocking smile on the heavenly evil king's face began to fade. Clearly, the decisiveness and ruthlessness of the Xun'er king had caught him off guard. Initially, they had indeed plotted to tarnish the reputation of the great Luo Heaven Domain, but now, it seemed the Xun'er king was just as sharp-minded, giving no indication of compromise. This unexpected turn had disrupted their plans. However, while their strategy seemed slightly unsettled, it did not affect the grander scheme. After all, today's event was meticulously orchestrated against the great Luo Heaven Domain. A sinister glint flickered in the heavenly evil king's eyes as his voice turned cold. Peaceful resolution? Xun'er king, do you truly think that our Netherworld Palace is anything like the second-rate forces you've dealt with before? Today, with all the forces of our Netherworld Palace gathered here, even if your great Luo Heaven Domain empties its entire strength, what can you possibly do? The Xun'er king retorted with chilling resolve. What can we do? My great Luo Heaven Domain is willing to fight your Netherworld Palace to the death. In the end, we can perish together. Both the great Luo Heaven Domain and Netherworld Palace were top-tier powers in the Northern Domain. If a full-blown war broke out, it would undoubtedly involve their total forces. Regardless of the victor, the price would be enormous. By then, the spoils of victory would likely fall into the hands of the other rival factions lurking in the shadows. The heavenly evil king's pupils narrowed slightly. The Xun'er king's uncompromising and aggressive stance carried undeniable pressure. After all, The determination to embrace mutual destruction was by no means an easy resolve to muster. Throughout the surrounding area, various forces secretly observed the confrontation between the two top-tier powers, their killing intent spreading like an invisible storm. For these smaller first-rate forces, involvement at this level was out of the question. They could only watch and wait, hoping to pick up the scraps when the opportunity arose. Haha, it's been many years, and the Xun'er king remains as ruthless as ever. Truly admirable. However, today, no matter how you try to bring about mutual destruction, your great Luo heaven domain will not get its wish. A sudden laugh cut through the tense atmosphere. From another corner of the sky, all eyes shifted toward the Sky Dragon Lord, who stood at the forefront of the Divine Hall's forces, his presence exuding dragon-like majesty. His words immediately sent a shockwave through many of the observers. The atmosphere grew increasingly tense as they began to sense something strange. It became apparent that today's event, supposedly a gathering of all major powers, was actually a trap set by the Netherworld Palace, Divine Hall, and other forces targeting the great Luo heaven domain. Before they could fully process their shock, another voice rang out from the direction of Xun'er Palace. A towering figure clad in golden battle armor, radiating an awe-inspiring aura, spoke in a low and commanding voice. Since the great Luo heaven domain has made so many enemies, Xun'er Palace shall also join the fray today, and see if you can escape unscathed. An uproar erupted, with the heavenly general of Xun'er Palace also stepping forward. The entire domain fell into a state of chaos. The expressions of many forces shifted rapidly, realizing the shocking turn of events. Three top-tier powers, the Netherworld Palace, Divine Hall, and Xun'er Palace, were all converging to strike at the great Luo heaven domain. Even though the great Luo heaven domain was itself a top-tier power, against the combined might of three such forces, its destruction seemed inevitable. Could it be that, even before the ultimate battle of the Grand Hunting War, the forces of the great Luo heaven domain would already meet their downfall here? Eyes flickered with unease across rival factions. The once restless atmosphere grew heavy and oppressive, as the standoff between these four-peak forces left everyone breathless. The Netherworld Prince of the Netherworld Palace, Feng Yi of the Divine Hall, and Xun'er Palace's Lu Yin and Xiao Tian stared coldly at Mu Chun, who stood at the forefront of the great Luo heaven domain. Their gazes were filled with contempt, as if he were nothing more than a helpless prey already cornered. In their minds, the situation was already a foregone conclusion, a death trap laid for the great Luo heaven domain. Yet, to their mild surprise, Mu Chen's youthful face did not reveal the panic or distress they had anticipated. Instead, his expression remained calm, serene even. Let's see if you can keep pretending once you're captured. The four of them sneered inwardly, dismissing his demeanor as little more than false bravado. Mu Chen stood at the forefront of Daluo Heaven Domain's massive forces. He had noticed the gazes from Feng Yi and the others, but chose to ignore them, his eyelids lowering slightly. After a brief pause, as a voice slowly resonated through the air, his slightly tensed body finally relaxed. That voice came from the Demon Gate. Hee, ganging up on others with superior numbers truly doesn't sit well with my Demon Gate. A seductive voice rang out. By the way, didn't your Netherworld Palace cripple one of our Demon Gate's battle geniuses not long ago? Don't you think it's time to give us an explanation for that? The one who spoke was naturally the alluring and enchanting demon fairy from the Demon Gate. She smiled charmingly at the Netherworld Palace, but beneath her mesmerizing voice lingered a chilling frost that sent shivers down spines. The sudden intervention of the Demon Gate shattered the previously oppressive silence. The heavenly evil king of Netherworld Palace froze for a moment. Then his expression darkened as he sneered at the demon fairy. Oh, does the Demon Gate also wish to meddle in today's affairs? Before the demon fairy could respond, an aged voice broke in. Since grievances are being settled here today, then we at 10,000 Saints Mountain also have some matters to address. The Saint Elder of 10,000 Saints Mountain stepped forward, his tone indifferent but resolute. Although Divine Hall is powerful, we at 10,000 Saints Mountain are no pushovers. Not long ago, an elder of ours, Elder Qing, fell with resentment due to your hall's siege. I believe it's time we settle this account. With 10,000 Saints Mountain also weighing in, the surrounding atmosphere shifted dramatically. The various gathered powers collectively drew sharp breaths, their eyes filled with shock. What was happening here? Were 6 of the top factions truly about to declare war? If it really came to blows, the entire landscape of the northern domain would undoubtedly be reshaped. Many smaller factions watched with eager excitement, never anticipating that the confrontation would escalate so explosively. In stark contrast, the leaders of Netherworld Palace, Divine Hall, and Xun'er Palace grew increasingly grim. The unexpected involvement of the Demon Gate and 10,000 Saints Mountain had completely upended their plans. They couldn't have imagined that Daluo Heaven Domain would secretly align with such formidable allies. The intended siege had now become utterly meaningless. The combined strength of Daluo Heaven Domain, 10,000 Saints Mountain, and the Demon Gate had already reached a point of rivaling their own forces. If they insisted on fighting, the price of such a battle would be one that none could afford. What an entertaining spectacle today. A raspy, mocking laughter broke the tension. The speaker was none other than the 10,000 Pythons elder of the Serpent God Temple. But no matter how thrilling this drama gets, our Serpent God Temple won't be taking part. Play your games however you wish. We're happy to spectate. With a wave of his sleeve, he ordered the Serpent God Temple's forces to retreat a bit, making it clear they would not involve themselves in the conflict. This neutral stance only deepened the pit in the hearts of the heavenly evil king and his allies. The Serpent God Temple was clearly biding its time, waiting for the fight to break out so they could swoop in and reap the spoils. The imminent clash, which had suffocated the air with tension mere moments earlier, suddenly dissipated. The standoff now felt awkward, as all parties recognized the balance of power. When both sides are evenly matched, the odds of all-out war drop significantly. For those smaller forces secretly hoping for a bloody battle between the top factions, the turn of events was disappointing. Without reckless, no-holds-barred conflict, where would they find the opportunity to ascend amidst the chaos? The strained atmosphere lingered for a while before the heavenly evil king finally spoke, his voice low and icy. Daluo Heaven Domain, you've orchestrated this masterfully. He was clearly referring to how Daluo Heaven Domain had turned what was meant to be a siege into such a stalemate. Likewise, the Xun'er king replied indifferently. Yet, his gaze flicked toward Mu Chen, admiration evident in his eyes. Successfully bringing 10,000 Saints Mountain and the Demon Gate onto their side, this was undoubtedly Mu Chen's handiwork. Detecting the Xun'er king's look, Mu Chen responded with a faint smile. Netherworld Palace had sought to exploit the enmity between Daluo Heaven Domain and Divine Hall, as well as Xun'er Palace, but they had underestimated their opponents. Such tactics were not exclusive to them. While an all-out war was momentarily avoided, Mu Chen was well aware that the opposing forces would not back down so easily. Today's gathering of powerhouses was just the opening act of a far larger conflict. As this thought crossed Mu Chen's mind, a sinister presence suddenly made itself known. From behind the heavenly evil king stepped Lin Ming, who had been glaring at Mu Chen throughout. His crimson tongue flicked across his lips as he let out a ghostly smile.